Hi, I'm Jane Pollak, and here's my story. I was recognized as an artist as a young kid. I was coloring on the walls of our basement when I was 5 and 6 years old, and a friend dubbed me the cave painter of White Plains, New York. In 4th grade, my mother framed a painting that I had done of cannibals, so that was nice. I was recognized as the artist. I wasn't encouraged to be an artist in high school. It wasn't academic. So I took languages, but when I got to college, I was recognized pretty early, and my fantastic theater professor, I was doing logos and scene design, and he asked me to design the logo for the Mount Holyoke College Summer Theater in 1970, which I did, and which lasted for 30 years. I graduated with a degree in studio art and theater, and I got a job teaching high school art, stagecraft and art foundation, so perfectly suited. There I learned a technique called Ukrainian Easter eggs, and this is the first egg I ever did, which I thought was one of the most beautiful things on earth. And I continued doing those. I got better at it. I started with the traditional Ukrainian Easter eggs and all the symbols. White is purity, red is love, black is remembrance. And then, because it was the early 70s, I was inspired by American patchwork quilts, which were coming back into fashion with the bicentennial. And I started doing eggs that were entirely quilt related. And those got me a lot of recognition. In fact, I had my first publicity in the early 80s. I was in a 2-page spread in Country Living magazine, which was quite a thrill. A big honor that I had received was an invitation to decorate eggs for the White House Easter egg roll during the Reagan administration. And so that credential carried me through, and the article said eggs in the Smithsonian. Part of my career development was having children. I had 3 children. I was a full-time mom and a part-time artist. And I continued to do craft shows, show my work, and exhibit as much as I could around their schedules. So that was kind of the thrum and behind everything was raising kids, which I still think is the most important job on earth. In order to keep my hand in and to make some money, I offered after-school art programs at home, art experiences I called it, and these children came to the family room, which I converted to an art studio twice a week, and I did that for several years. I was selected by catalogs to be on their covers and to sell my eggs. The most exciting was winning the Flax catalog cover contest, where you had to create the logo. You can see a black and white F on one of the eggs. And they loved it, and I got first prize. It was a $1,000 gift certificate to the catalog, and those went out to 1.2 million people around the country. My sister came with me to a craft show one weekend in Connecticut, and she noticed people's reaction to my work. They said, "Jane," they would just ooh and ah, and then they would walk away. She said, "I think if people could wear your eggs, they would buy them." So this is what I pictured, and I thought, I think she's wrong. But I figured out a way to cut the eggs and to make brooches and cufflinks and earrings, and that was a huge success in my business and put me on the map. And these were my jewelry pieces. I also created my first brochure where I had to select what the themes were and what the pieces were, which is an evolutionary step for any entrepreneur, to kill your darlings and select what you think would make sense and do something else with the rest of them, but not show like, here's everything I do, but to actually be selective about it, which was incredibly important. I had another beautiful press piece in Victoria magazine. They featured my brooches in one of their issues. And then by that time, 1996, I had written my first book, Decorating Eggs, Exquisite Designs with Wax and Dye, which continues to be in print. That put me on the map with the Today Show. I was interviewed by Ann Curry, who I think at that point she asked me, "How much are your eggs?" And I think they were $100 at the time, or maybe $150. And she looked a little incredulous, as you can see from her expression. I wanted to write another book, and I thought that egg decorating wasn't enough of a platform, but I had learned so many lessons in that time that I wrote about that, a sole proprietor, because to me, it's a heartfelt industry that I'm in, being an entrepreneur, of doing something that I love. And I wrote this book called Sole Proprietor, 101 Lessons from a Lifestyle Entrepreneur. My business works for me. I don't work for my business, and some of you may relate to that. I also, at this time, had started a group called Jane Pollak's Arts Forum, where I think I had 8 or 10 women came once a month on a Friday all day, and we would devote ourselves to covering all aspects of their business. And these are women who were prominent artists and became even more prominent. All 3 of my children have been married, and this was the wedding in 2019. My youngest got married, and all my grandchildren. I had a 38-year marriage that dissolved in 2011, And I wanted to capture that because that was also going on. We artists live very diverse and comprehensive lives. So I wanted to talk about that part of my life, that too much of not enough, which is basically I made a feast of crumbs in my life, starting with my family, getting little things, very delicious morsels, but not a feeling of completeness. And it took years of therapy and 12-step recovery work to really fall in love with myself enough to say, okay, I deserve. That's a message to all artists. We deserve. Right before the pandemic, I took a fantastic class with Liz Alpert Faye. So here we are in Guilford, Connecticut. And I had learned this craft and came back to New York and everything shut down. I made my first penny rug in Liz's class, which was here's, the beginning of it. But because there was nothing else to do, I just kept sewing. This was the second penny rug. Penny rugs are a name for this craft of applique, felted wool, and pearl cotton, and buttons and beads, done in the days where women, they didn't have compasses or templates. They used pennies and quarters and cups and saucers. That was what was handy to make these circles, and this tradition was born, which I fell in love with. I love the colors, I love the intricacy of it. And then I had a wonderful spread in Where Women Create. And that brings me to today. I live and work in New York City. I love what I do. I'm sitting in front of a piece that I made for my living room. I would love for you to have a piece of Jane in your life. My work is on Etsy, and I hope that you'll take a look.